Sunil Vachani could have joined the family business but chose not to. He always wanted to start something of his own, and so he did. Starting with CRT televisions in 1993, Dixon Technologies today manufactures electronics including home appliances, wearables and hearables, and a lot more for some of the largest companies in India and around the world. In this episode, we hear from him on his travels and triumphs with entrepreneurship. Thank you so much for joining us today for Leadership Mantras with Forbes India. So I'm going to start from the very beginning and go back to when you set up Dixon Technologies. I think back then, if I remember correctly from our last conversation, you told me that manufacturing was considered to be sacred, and it was something that was known to be something that has to be done in-house in a sense. But you sort of believed that it can be a business that where people can sort of outsource it in a sense. What drove you to sort of, take up this risk and eventually convince your father as well to believe in your dream?
So thank you, Naini, for having me over. I think, as you know the story that I came back from London, this was in 1992, and I told my late father that, I want to start something on my own. And I think he was a man who was very, very innovative, always first with ideas. So he was very open to the thought, and he asked me, what do you want to do? So I told him that, I want to look at manufacturing as a service, manufacturing products for others. So he was a bit surprised and taken aback, because in those days, manufacturing was, sacrosanct. It was like the sacred cow, which had to happen in-house. And there wasn't really a trend emerging of people looking at brands, looking at outsourcing. So he was, not very sure of the idea, but I think he trusted my instinct, and he said, okay, fine, let's go ahead with it. I think the question that what really drove me that time, when you look back, I think different things drive people at different stages of life. And when I look back, that what was really the trigger and that motivation to start something new and really do something big in manufacturing, I think it was a lot to do with my, the way the joint family was set up. So we were a large family, my late father, his brothers in the business, and my elder brothers also involved in the business, and I was the youngest in the family. So really, my motivation was to really, to kind of meet my late father's expectations, and also tell him that, I'm good enough for getting the job done. So that was really the trigger. And even now, when people tell me and really, come and kind of praise the journey and what Dixon as a team we have created. And when they tell me that, your father would have been very proud to see this, that really gives me the biggest high, and that really brings the most joy and happiness to me even now.
So when you sort of started out, a lot of people told you that you're too young to be a managing director, and back then it couldn't have been as easy. But how did you sort of shut out all the noise and focus on what you were doing?
Yeah, so I think if I recall the early days, I think I faced many challenges when we were just starting off. Firstly, my late father's company was going through challenging times. I think I mentioned this before, that the company was really focused on the erstwhile USSR market, and then when that country broke up, the parent company went through lots of challenges. So when I was starting off and when I was going to raise resources, I faced a lot of rejection from the financial institutions, mainly because of what my late father's company had gone through. Also, when I went to take advice from senior people in the industry and even bureaucrats in the government that time, a lot of people said that I was just wasting my time, because India's future lies in software and not really in electronic hardware. It's funny that argument is still being discussed even now, 30 years hence. Wow. But that really drove me, and that I wanted to take that challenge head on. And I wanted to prove that this can really happen in India, that India can become the next manufacturing hub, not only for the domestic market but for the global markets. So that really drove me to take on this challenge. And as far as the point that I was too young to take on the role of managing director, that really didn't bother me, because I knew I believed in my ideas. And I knew if I put in my best, I dedicate myself to what really is required, I would get the job done. So that really didn't perturb me. But I think, the challenges that I faced in the early days, that really pushed me hard, to get the job done.
Spoke about, being very headstrong, being super sure of the ideas that you had. But when you first started off, you did face a couple of unsuccessful businesses, things that you planned and didn't work out as per plan. Tell us some learnings that you got out of these experiences, so to speak, failures in a sense, if I were to put it that way. And how did that kind of, help you turn into a better leader and help you make more effective decisions?
I think, before I answer that question, a lot of people ask me that we don't see that kind of innovation coming out of India as we see in other markets like US. When will we have, let's say, our own Googles and Apple coming out and creating innovative products? So I think when I reflect back on this, one of the reasons that we are not really coming out with innovative products and services at regular intervals as we should be. And I think one of the reasons is that, as a society, we kind of look down upon failure. We discourage failure. And when I see in markets where there's huge innovation happening, right from very early days, right from school days and even college and business, failure is kind of encouraged.
Exactly.
People look at, promoters or entrepreneurs or startups who have encountered some sort of failure, in their history. So I think that's one of the issues, and I think that we're facing right now as a country, as an industry. And when I look back at my own journey, I was very fortunate that my late father, let me commit those mistakes. So as I mentioned to you, when I came back from London after doing my studies there, and I came back, the first venture that I started was for manufacturing cordless telephones. This was a unit that I set up in Himachal Pradesh, because this was a company of the Himachal Pradesh government, which they were selling off a small unit, and which I happened to just buy it, with a small capital. And that company, I ran it for about 2 years, and very soon I saw myself running out of capital, right? And I really didn't focus on the detailing and the numbers, and I was just really focused on a bigger picture of creating a market for those products. So that failure really taught me at a very early age that you got to have a microscope and a telescope at the same time, as an entrepreneur. You got to be looking at the bigger picture all the time. You got to be looking at the opportunities that are there in the industry, painting a picture on a bigger canvas. But at the same time, don't take your eyes off the numbers, right? Don't take your eyes off, the daily things that you have to focus on. So that was a great lesson that I learned after failing, and I'm grateful, as I said, to my family for believing in me in spite of that, disastrous start that I had, and even losing a lot of money, which was huge at that time.
Yeah. When it comes to innovation, I think you guys started off with CRT televisions, and today there's smartphones, there's wearable. I mean, you're constantly reinventing and innovating in terms of the product side of things, of course. But when it comes to your own leadership style, how necessary is it to constantly reinvent yourself and keep yourself relevant in a sense?
So as a company, when we started off, we were really dependent a lot on a single category of product, which was CRT television. And if I remember correctly, it was almost about 95% of our revenue was coming from a single product category. And I think we realized very early on, fortunately for us, that we cannot be focusing on a single product category. After we took that decision, we got into other products like lighting, like home appliances, semi-automatic washing machines. We got into mobile phone manufacturing, and now of course the foray into telecom hardware, into the wearables and hearables category like the smartwatches, and of course other product categories coming up in the near future. So I think that way the company's really reinvented itself, at very regular intervals, because it's not easy getting into a new product category and maintaining leadership. So today if you see our position across product categories, Dixon has a very, very large market share, and we have almost more than 50% of the total installed capacity and the total demand in the country. So I guess it's not been easy, but I think it was a very important decision to make. And coming back to your point on continuous innovation, we see ourselves being in an industry which is not very easy, right? So if you look at the manufacturing industry and manufacturing of the products that we do, the entry barriers are very low. Also, you must appreciate the point that in a lot of product categories, the customer themselves were manufacturing this product at one point or the other.
Yeah.
So they know the product way better than what you do, right? So what that means is that as a company and as a team, you need to constantly innovate. You need to be very frugal with your cost structure. You need to try and do things much better than your customer. Right? You need to build processes which are very robust, which are as good if not better than your customer. So that way it's a very difficult industry to operate in. But I think full credit to our team for having done an outstanding job and having maintained that leadership position across many, many product categories. So if you look at the global markets and the EMS landscape, electronic manufacturing service as a landscape, there are not many companies who have excelled across multiple product categories. And if I see Dixon, I think that stands out as a unique advantage in a unique moat that we've built around the business. That Dixon has a strength across many, many product categories, and we hope to continue to building on that strength and also look at newer product categories which have synergy with our overall values.
You mentioned, and you have mentioned this in our previous conversations as well, there are a lot of, of what Dixon is today, the credit goes to your team. But as a leader, how challenging is it for you, or how does one rather, as a leader, put together, these very different people into one cohesive team and drive them to achieve the same kind of success?
So, I always tell my team members that, I'm so fortunate to have them as part of my family, and I think these guys are, the best in the world. And I always have the, that I'm fond of old Hindi music, and I always, have that song for them, that Tareef Karun Kya Uski Jisne Inhe Banaya. Wow. So even at our, annual get together, sometimes I sing that song for my team. But on a serious note, I think if I look back, that we've built a great team. And I think some of the things that we did at a very early stage, in our life was firstly to empower our team members. So this was done at a very early stage where we had division heads for all the product categories that we got into. And these division heads were empowered to take the decisions. And of course, it wasn't the will of a single person being imposed on anybody as far as when we were making the decisions relating to the division. So it was a lot of brainstorming, it was a lot of thought process going into it, and at the end of it we took a decision what all of us felt was best for the division. Second, I think we from a very early stage we had that huge trust that we put upon our people, right? When you empower people, you also must trust people, right? There were instances which which happened, which really sometimes shook that kind of foundation, but we always believed, and we still believe, that the only way to run an operation like this, or in any company, is to trust your people. Because if you see, I think majority of the people, repose that trust, right? It's maybe there'll be some people who will come down the way who might do things which might shake your confidence, but that should not shake your belief, right? So I think that was very important. Third, I think a lot of our middle and senior members of our family became stakeholders at a very early stage of the company. So even when we did not have any sort of private equity, we had shareholders, a large family of shareholders outside the family, right? And that has stayed till now, where now we are a listed company. We have big program of ESOPs at different levels in the organization. So I think, and also when I think back, I think what really helped us to lay down very clearly that what were the expectations from the team, that what we really felt were the important values, values such as transparency, honesty, dedication to the company. These were values that we told everybody that these are most important, right? Other things might go wrong sometimes, but we cannot deviate from certain values that we all have to believe in as a team. So I think these are some of the factors that have really helped us build a great team, which I think is the best in the world. And like I said, I'm very fortunate.
Absolutely. And in the early 2000s, Dixon launched a brand that probably didn't do as well as you guys thought it would. And clearly it wouldn't have been the best patch for the both of you and the company in general. How does one sort of turn around from a time like that, when things aren't going as planned?
So, one lesson that I learned after getting into the brand is that, in life, the decisions of what not to do are far more important than the decisions of what to do. The reason that I think, if I look back, we got into a brand was because we felt that we were too focused, as I mentioned earlier, on a single product category and a single customer. And we thought getting into a brand might be a good way of getting out of this dependence on a particular category and a particular customer. But we were fortunate that very early days of getting into a brand, we realized that we had made a huge mistake. And what really happened was that when we launched the brand, we realized that we were neither investing what we should have in the brand, and we were neither investing in manufacturing. So we stopped looking at things like backward integration. We stopped looking at getting into new product categories. So it we were sailing in two boats, and we were really not headed in the right direction. And I believe in a lot into power of yoga and spirituality. And I've like in yoga, the minute you get your core right, the minute you get your balance right, everything, and focus right, everything falls into place, right? And this is what happened for us when we decided that the brand business is not for us. And now if you see our tagline, it's Dixon, the brand behind the brands. So that's actually now cast in stone, that we will not compete with our customer, we will not get into our own brand, and we will not really lose our focus, and we will not lose our core. So I think they were difficult times because we did lose out a lot on the opportunities. We lost a lot of money also in the business. But as I mentioned, that we were fortunate that we did course correction very early on after making the mistake. Sometimes what happens is that entrepreneurs, and including myself, we tend to cling on to something just because we're not ready to admit that we made a mistake. So I think one of the lessons is that it's okay, mistakes happen, it's fine, and we all are human. Just accept it and move on, and just leave the past behind.
And your late father, was an entrepreneur. He created this iconic brand, which was Western. When you started your business, were there certain, pieces of learnings or advice that he passed on to you that, you remember till date and that you implement till date?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about him, to you during the interview, and also when people meet me, because I think he was such a big influence on me, and a big influence on how we have shaped as a company and what we've been able to achieve in the organization. And even now, it's been more than 20 years that he passed away. Even now, when I meet people, they still remember him because he had such a connect with people, within the industry, in the government, and outside the industry, that really people, he could just, in the first meeting itself, he could floor anybody. So that's the kind of quality that he had. And I think one thing that I really learned from him is that, how to do really work selflessly. So he was part of the many industry chambers, and I used to, really look at from outside and admire him because he used to put in so much time in the issues of the industry and also his own work. And that really inspired me. So I think now, even when I look at myself, I'm a part of many industry chambers, and I like to give back to the industry, which has also given us so much. And also another really big point that I learned from him was again, that how to really look inwards and outwards at the same time. You see, because as entrepreneurs, that's one role that we can play, bridging the outside and the inside. So that's really one thing that I learned from him, besides many, many other things.
Great, Sunil. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some very thought-provoking leadership mantras. It was lovely having you on the show.
Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you so much.